You're listening to Contesting Wrestling, a podcast where we are on a quest to understand why people watch wrestling. When I say we, I mean me. Your journey is your own, and I'm not here to tell you what to do with that. Okay, there are other podcasts for that. This is here for me to cathartically suffer through the process of learning about America's second or third greatest original art form. Kind of depends on where you want to put it. It goes jazz and then either wrestling or stand-up comedy. Depends on how you want to call
comic
it.
books.
Right, comic books. Okay, yeah.
We should make jazz wrestling, where jazz plays while you wrestle.
I've been kind of pitching that for a while, actually.
There was that one Oscar match
I think that would be
watched.
great.
Yeah, the one Kana match was that was kind of jazzy.
It was kind of jazzy.
What the dude was playing.
But anyway, so the point. My name is Evan Burke. By the way, you can find me on the internet, or at least on Twitter at Evan Burke, etc. I am somebody who doesn't like wrestling traditionally, right? Because if you don't know anything about it, it seems dumb. But I have to admit, after many episodes of being taken on a guided tour through the high and low lights of the art form, I'm at least willing to say it is more interesting than I gave it credit for. And especially when you delve into the history of people who you really might not know about. Like, I had never heard of today's subject before, and I was so impressed with him, and also so blown away by the tragedy of the mishandling of his career, as far as I could tell, by fucking bookers. Well, we'll get to it, but we're gonna move on to my co-hosts and our guest today, all of whom are people with a spectacular ocean of knowledge about wrestling, through which I will try to swim in order to attain the sunken treasure of enjoying wrestling.
Evan, what did we tell you about the ocean?
This is a metaphorical ocean. You can go in metaphorical oceans.
Yeah. So Evan, that was very poetic and super nice. You know, my name, as usual, is Doc Diamondfire. Been involved in wrestling for about a dozen years now. I've done a number of positions in front of and behind the scenes, and right now I'm doing this. I'm looking forward to talking to all of my friends about our subject today, which we are keeping a mystery until we reveal it, I guess. Professor, tell us briefly about yourself.
Well, I am Dr. Ben Abelson, professor of philosophy at Mercy College, and wrestle nautical adventurer. To continue Evan's metaphor. And our other co-host.
This is where I talk. Okay. I'm sorry. I was thinking about butts. Anyway, I am, as always, Katie Vella, the professional referee. I am on Twitter at @RefKatie. I've been in wrestling since 2014. I've been reffing since late 2017, coming up on 3 years now. I am also a Twitch streamer. I stream mostly Pokemon. You can follow me there at Over Here Counting. And today we have a very special guest. It is my protege in XSW, their most senior and tenured referee. It is Devin T. Simmons. Devin, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Devin. As Katie said, I am the senior referee at XSW.
Extremely serious wrestling.
Serious
for
wrestling,
those
yes.
who don't know.
Yes, extremely.
It's pretty rad, and I'm psyched to be here. I'm a fan of the show, and I'm excited. So we're going to talk about Ron Simmons today. No relation.
Okay.
Wait, it's not your
So
own?
I do have an older brother named Ron Simmons. So.
Oh, man.
Wow.
Did you
So
hear that, everyone? Devin is Ron Simmons' younger brother.
So we just have a bunch of hidden camera footage of you jumping your brother, and then hilarity ensuing after that.
Yeah, exactly. Those are the matches. It's me and my older brother.
To be clear, your older brother did also wrestle in the WWE for a period in the 90s under the name Farouk, but was a different guy than the guy we are talking about.
He was a job guy.
Yeah, he's a job guy.
He was Farouk B-Sod.
There you go.
That's good.
All right.
That's
now
good.
that the real listeners are left after the fake friends bounced after that joke. Let's so
For those three of you still listening.
before we delve into today's subject, though, Devin, I want to ask you some broad questions that we ask of any guest that comes on this show. So the whole core of this, the thing that I am trying to figure out over the course of contesting wrestling, given all things in the world, all ways that one could theoretically spend one's time, from napping to all the television shows to learning a foreign language to math to and so on in that fashion, why wrestling? Why is wrestling a thing people should spend their time with?
Well, I can't speak for other people. I can only speak for myself.
That's great, yeah.
And for me, I've been a wrestling fan for longer than I can remember. Like, I have an early memory of a Razor Ramon promo on an episode of Raw that was me going, oh, Razor Ramon is talking, which means I knew who he was. So, like, I had been watching Raw.
The real Razor Ramon.
Yeah, real Razor Ramon.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that later. Go ahead, Devin.
Yeah. But, so, the reason I really enjoy wrestling it's the stories, and it's not just like storylines like, oh, he stole my girlfriend, so I'm going to have a match with him where we hit each other with chairs. But it's like, each match is a self-contained story, and the really great matches tell really great stories physically. Sure. And of course, there's all the athleticism and all that kind of stuff that I really enjoy. And sometimes I do just like watching big dudes beat the hell out of each other.
It's very satisfying in like a primal way.
Yes, and one of our matches that we're talking about today especially is just a great example of people just beating on each other and it being a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Do you think of, obviously, you grow up watching more traditional quote-unquote wrestling, but and then I would definitely say that XSW falls under the umbrella of wrestling. Like we were on record on this podcast and saying it's totally wrestling, but it is a different
not as the State
approach.
Athletic Commission is concerned, though.
No,
right,
yeah.
You
From the
hear
State
that,
Athletic
State
Commission,
Athletic
it
Commission?
is a sketch comedy show.
It's not wrestling. Don't come look at it.
It doesn't tick all the boxes that the State Athletic Commission needs you to tick for it to be wrestling. But it more speaks to the fact that the State Athletic Commission isn't really concerned with wrestling. But that's another story entirely.
What is different to you, and what is maybe the same to you about, like, if you were reffing quote unquote more traditional wrestling?
Well, I'm a pretend referee. I will say that for real. Like, I pretend to ref a pretend sport.
And that's why I'm here. We're going to make you a real referee, Devin.
So you're going in. You're counting to 5.
Yeah. Whatever. Well, I mean, whatever they need me to do.
I mean, what's a real referee? I mean, that's why when I get into it with people, if I have to ever about something like XSW, it's like, is XSW wrestling? But what's really different about it? Because someone's like, it's not real wrestling. Yeah. Like, what's real wrestling? You want real wrestling? You go to Iowa State and you watch 12-year-olds roll around in singlets until one of them wins, and then by the time they're adults, they stop doing it because there's no money in it.
In a sense, it is another level of artifice, which is just an extension of wrestling already.
Yeah, exactly. Right? The cool thing about it is, like, to me, the only real difference between what we do at XSW and what they do on TV for AEW and WWE is legitimately, we're just not actually doing moves to each other. Like, that's really it.
For the most part.
It's the same structures. Yeah, we do have real trained professional wrestlers on the show, and they have real professional wrestling matches, whereas we pretend to hit each other with pile drivers and shit.
And that's what I have to say, as coming to it from an outsider perspective. If you have not checked out XSW, I absolutely recommend you do so, because the blend of, like, real wrestlers and people who are purely just from the comedy universe and throwing them in there together to see what I think is absolutely genius. Like, I just think that works so well.
He was gonna come to the next show we had, and then
Yeah, the world went to shit.
Yeah.
I can swear a lot, right? You guys don't have a...
Totally.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Go nuts. Go nuts.
Fully at liberty.
Yeah.
Well, we
Oh,
do
yeah,
have
do-
we
do-
do have a
do
limit,
you.
but we tend not to tell
Yeah.
guests that. We just send people to their house if they go past it.
I murdered a guy on one of the double Patreon episodes that you got to pay $20 for, and it's been fine. So don't worry about it.
Oh, okay.
He was Marty Jannetty's accomplice.
I made a guy disappear.
Don't tell Captain Romance this, but that's actually what happened to Dungeon Master. Evan killed him.
Oh no.
Gotcha.
I didn't know his name. That's why I don't understand this reference. I just, I'm just a killing machine. I was just trained by the government to be a killing machine. So, as we all knew, so I'm not going to explain
I was going to
that.
say, that makes a whole lot of sense based on stuff I've heard about you and listening to you on this show.
I'm glad that really comes out in this show. I'm glad that people have been able to take that away. That
You're
I'm
a dangerous man.
Yeah, that I'm more machine than man in my heart at this point, and born to kill. Anyway, speaking of born to kill with laughs.
Oh.
No,
I thought you were segueing to Vader from there.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Speaking of born to kill with largeness, with a pure what a slab of a man Vader is. But no, all right. So the first match you introduce it and then we'll get into it.
Okay, so it's Ron Simmons versus Vader for the WCW World Title from a house show on August 2nd, 1992. It eventually aired, but it was originally just a house show. And this is the match where Ron Simmons defeated Vader to become the first ever black world champion in wrestling history. So a very important match in the history of wrestling for sure.
So the match itself, these two guys come to the ring. Vader looks like one of the Rocky Mountains that he hails from. This is peak Vader right here. If you watch Vader's later WWF run, and we do see a peak of it, you see that Vader had diminished a little bit by then, but here he was still peak Vader. He looked like, he would rip your head off for fun.
And apparently he
because
kind
he's
of
just
would.
compelled
Like
to.
those clotheslines that look really legit, they were really legit.
But Ron Simmons, the challenger, he looked up for. He looked like his head was firmly not going to get ripped off that night, and indeed it did not. The only thing that was taken off was the title from Vader. So, Evan, what did you think of this straight up before we get really into it?
It was frustrating that I felt that this match, the first match, and as far as I could tell, maybe the earliest
Definitely,
of the matches we watched, was far and away the one where I felt like Ron Simmons was getting to wrestle like he wants to wrestle. I did there was a level of sort of freedom and abandon to this match. They had great chemistry, and this felt like we were talking about how there's sort of like a big guy style, that an archetypical big guy style, and this I felt like was one of the most entertaining, just classic big guy versus slightly different kind of classic big guy matches we've seen.
Yeah, this match is one of it's two big dudes running into each other. And it wasn't going to be a technical, display. But there's some really cool stuff, because it's not just them hitting each other. Occasionally there's some actual wrestling that happens. I mean,
oh yeah,
Ron Simmons suplexes Vader at a certain point, and you're like, Vader doesn't get suplexed. That just doesn't happen. I mean, as a match itself, it's fine. It's entertaining. It's not an all-time classic, but it is historically significant because Ron Simmons is the first black world champion. I throw that in quotes because there are black men that have held world championships in the past that just aren't recognized.
Oh, we should definitely talk
Brazil
about that.
was the champion,
Right.
But it wasn't recognized. It was one of those. If he doesn't win, they will kill us.
That was the NWA title?
Right.
With Bobo
I
Brazil?
believe it was the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. But it was one of those. They will rip us to shreds if he doesn't win. So we'll just give it to him, and then.
Where were they? When that happened?
I don't really remember. I know it's just one of those weird stories of Phantom Champion.
Ric Flair would do that overseas sometimes when he was scheduled to defend the NWA title, and he thought that the audience would literally kill him if he won. He would just drop the belt and win it back a few days later, or he wouldn't, and he'd just go home with the belt because nobody was ever going to see these matches. Like, that's why, like, officially speaking, he's like a 16-time world champion, but it's closer to 22 or 23 or 25. It really depends.
Yeah.
And he's
What
not
year
the
was
only
this
one that
again?
did stuff.
1992. To your point earlier, Evan, about, him wrestling a more exciting kind of with more a style with more abandon here. By the time we get to 1997, 96 and 97 in the WWF, he's already kind of past his prime athletically. Like, you got to realize that Ron Simmons was one of the greatest defensive linemen in the history of college football, playing for Florida State University. He also had a pro career for several years before he became a wrestler. So he was already pretty well into like his 30s, I think, when he started wrestling, or at least 20s.
Yeah, he didn't have a long path to the top in wrestling. He was he was trained, he was in a tag team called Doom, which was cool. And then but pretty quickly after that, he was put in the world title picture because he already had so much notoriety. So a lot of his career, physically speaking, is a bit of a decline. I don't want to talk ill of the late career of Ron Simmons, and the premium episode we'll get into kind of his latter day blossoming as another tag team wrestler. But yeah, his WWF run, he was there to play a character, and his movement in ring was kind of limited. I think, despite the fact that as the Farouk years seems like he was kind of being mishandled, and he could have been a bigger star than they wanted him to be. I think he took what they gave him and went further than they thought he was going to go with.
Any issues I had with those Farouk era matches, I felt were Vince's fault.
Yes, and we will certainly get to that. I don't want to skim over this. The reaction of the crowd at the end of the Vader match is phenomenal. You see one kid almost jump over the guardrail several times. He's so excited.
And to your point about this match being like where he's wrestling the hardest, so to speak, remember that he knew he was getting the title, and he knew how historical this moment was, and he knew if he didn't do literally the best he ever could, a black man may not ever get that opportunity again, because they'd be like, well, we gave it to, and this is terrible and wrong, but they could have been like, well, we gave Ron Simmons the chance and he sucked and no one liked him, so why try again? Which is a fucked up thing to have to say, that mentality would even exist, but it's entirely possible that that was his thought process going into the match. I do wonder if it was.
Yeah, I feel like I mentioned this on this podcast once before. I definitely said it in conversation. I saw an interview with Aquafina about Crazy Rich Asians, and they asked her like, "Oh, you hope the movies succeed so that they can make more like Asian-fronted movies?" And she said, "Well, if the movie fails, they should also make more Asian-fronted movies. White people make movies that fail all the time, and they just keep making movies with white people." And like Katie, to your point, that was the attitude, especially amongst like Southern promoters. It was like, well, we'll give the black guy
Speaking
a
of
chance
Southern
to see if it
promoters,
works.
Bill Watts should be given credit here for being the guy to put the title on Ron Simmons. And he was known for promoting black wrestlers in Mid-South Wrestling. He, Junkyard Dog was the top star under him. So was Coco Beware, when, the rest of the territories didn't have anything like that.
Yeah, Bill Watts is an interesting figure, because we can definitely give him credit for booking black wrestlers to the top whenever he was booking. I don't want to give him too much credit in terms of social justice or whatever, because his decisions were purely financial. He was like, man, the other promoters are stupid not booking black guys on top. Black guys will draw the most money from the black people. And that was all he was thinking was, the only color I see is green, brother. It's an attitude that still persists today, and it's a real problem. That being said, when the only chances given to you are dubious chances, you still got to take them. And Ron Simmons took it, and he ran with it.
This is sort of unrelated, but I'm watching this Netflix documentary that just premiered called High Score, which is about like the history of video games in the 70s and 80s. It's great.
Oh, I got to watch
It's great,
that.
but I did not realize that the sort of origin of Pac-Man came from people sitting down and being like, well, we've got all these games with shooting, and the guys like that. How do we make a game that women will like? well, what about a game based around eating? And and it's all supposed to be cookies. Pac-Man's eating cookies.
Oh, I thought they were going for the junkie market.
I need these pills, man. I guess it's fucking ghosts, man. They're coming.
And then the fruit is so that their teeth don't fall.
Yeah. You got to keep from getting scurvy.
Right.
That's the
Exactly.
That's fantastic.
sorry. So
Devin,
Ben, what were you gonna ask?
I was going to ask Devin how he felt about the whole presentation here. I noticed like they don't mention that he's the first black champion or anything like that.
No,
which I had kind of mixed feelings about, but
I mean, I get why you wouldn't do it, but I do. Okay, so this is a thing I'm going to say for your listeners because they can't tell by listening to me. I'm black.
That's not exactly the way we introduce a guest. It's like, this is Devin. He's black. Like that doesn't come off too well, you know.
And it was your idea to talk about Ron Simmons, not ours.
Yes, it was.
We've been kicking it around regardless, but it worked out.
Yeah. Doing a wrestling show, you got to talk about Ron Simmons at some point. But like me saying, well, what's something that I have an insight on that you guys wouldn't have? And it's like, oh yeah, race stuff, and you already did the New Day, so
right. And Truth.
And Truth, yeah, which those episodes will kind of inform some of this stuff too. But yeah, I know as a kid, I was not watching WCW. I had no idea any of this stuff happened. But when I was a teenager and I went back and discovered a lot of stuff, this match always had this is Ron Simmons, the first black world champion. So I didn't have the historical context for anything. But if I had known at the time or had seen it at the time and been not 4 years old, I would have definitely noticed that they didn't mention that he was the first black world champion or that this was like he has an opportunity to be the first black world champion. But I also would have known that he was the first black world champion. It would have been a big fucking deal. So maybe they didn't feel like they needed to. They're like, people know. So the people that care know and will care. And the people that don't care won't know. So
and maybe we'd rather not point out to them that
exactly.
we haven't done it before.
So we don't want to, or we don't want to trigger any racists by saying this is the first black world champion. We could just say it's a black world champion.
It seems like it's plays into the history of major wrestling promotions trying to have it both ways, where it's like, well, let's be more inclusive because people like that now and it'll make us money, but let's make sure we still hang on to the racists because they're a big market.
Right. You don't fully condemn them, but you're like, we need their money, so let's not piss them off too much.
Oh, especially in the Southern wrestling circuits that WCW really made their bread and butter on. I mean, even the people, they didn't mention it. I mean, they didn't mention it for all the above reasons. Like, I can picture people in like Atlanta, thinking if they were to mention it, thinking to themselves that they weren't racist, but I don't know why they have to mention it. He's just a great wrestler. Racism ended in the 60s, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and like it's just they needed the racist dollar. Racism in Northern wrestling was absolutely there. It kind of took a different form. I always like to point out that wrestling in New York in the 70s, under Vince McMahon Sr., almost everybody in the WWF was some kind of broad ethnic stereotype. Yep. And that's because in New York City, you had to draw from every ethnic group to fill Madison Square Garden.
You said when you first started training at Johnny Rod's, he took that from early WWF. You're the Amish guy.
If you go to one of Johnny Rod's school shows, which I highly recommend if you're in Brooklyn once all this is over, hopefully they start back up, a lot of the basic gimmicks he gives their guys are just based on what he perceives their ethnicity to be. And indeed, my first gimmick was he looked at me and he was like, "You're going to be the Amish guy." So I'm like, "Yes, Johnny, I'm going to be the Amish guy." And he says, "You know why I say Amish?" I'm like, "Why?" He says, "Because I speak English." I'm like, "Okay, Johnny, that's cool."
Dunking on the Amish.
As a result, however, there's always like half a dozen to a dozen guys going through Johnny's school whose gimmick is just that they're Puerto Rican. Because Johnny's Puerto Rican, so he attracts a lot of Puerto Rican guys, so he makes a lot of guys where that's their whole gimmick. And he doesn't see why that would be an issue. After all, Pedro Morales was over like Rover. But, he was also Pedro Morales, not a bunch of teenagers.
Also, right. I think anybody who grew up in the greater New York City area will tell you that I'm going to say 60 to 70% of the white people that live within a 3-hour drive of New York City define themselves almost primarily by, like, I'm Italian and I like to fuck, or I'm Irish and I like to fuck, and that's it. I lived in Long Island for 6 years, and I'm still very upset about it.
As well, you should be.
Yeah, I saw so many fight. It was the most violent place I've ever lived. I saw so many, like 2 times I saw a guy like just get like beaten within an inch of his life on the train on a Saturday. Anyway, carrying on.
I think one thing that helped Ron Simmons here was the stereotype that they stuck him with was one of the less like offensive ones, just that he's an athlete, right?
Yeah, it was. They used him for his legitimate sports background, which of course is what helps propel him to the top. Where they're like,
sure,
he's a legitimate athlete, which WCW loved at the time.
Totally.
And so,
Bill Watts was big on football players, and Jim Ross was big on football players.
I mean, Jim Ross always has been like that. Still is like that. Was always through that. I mean, even with like Bradshaw, he would always every match. He played with the Oakland Raiders, and then of course, if you look at Oakland Raiders like roster logs, you don't see him anywhere on them. But it's whatever. JR was like, he played football. He tried out for the Raiders. We'll say he played for the Raiders.
Boomer sooner, y'all.
And like, I don't know that much about football, but in this match, Jim Ross mentions it. We get a great defensive lineman versus a great offensive lineman.
Right, because Vader played football too. He played for the Rams.
And you feel that dynamic, right? Like the guy, one guy trying to get around the other guy, and the other guy trying to stop him.
Now, does Simmons also have an amateur wrestling background at all? Because he seems like he puts a hold on a guy like he knows what he's doing. That doesn't necessarily mean amateur wrestling background, but he looks like he knows what he's doing in a way that I appreciated.
I think that's just from years and years of playing football. So
sure.
Just being an athlete, you can kind of apply that kind of stuff to every athletic that you do. I mean, every athlete I know is at least halfway decent at every sport.
Yeah, true. And
they're really good at one, they're halfway decent at everything else.
And there is a way, actually, the football thing kind of makes sense too, because there's like the way in which he's able to move around as a big guy and still be like quick and still like be able to like snap the other guy up and like, you know, all this shit, and especially, you know, like moving Vader around, and Vader is clearly just like a slab filled with lead fucking pellets, like,
Vader is a football team.
Yeah, he's an entire football team.
I don't know if you guys saw NXT TakeOver last night, but Pat McAfee.
I saw a fair amount of it.
Pat McAfee, you know, you could tell he was really rough at the mechanics of pro wrestling in a lot of ways, but athletically, he was amazing. And
he did a lot better than I thought he would. I did not know the guy from anything. I haven't been watching NXT. I was like, they're bringing some guy in because Adam Cole's already gone through the whole roster. And then him and Cole had one of the best matches of the night. Really?
And psychology-wise,
it was kind of an underwhelming takeover by my standards, but they have such a high standard.
Psychology-wise, McAfee is an absolute natural. I mean, just everything he does makes me angry. So he's a great.
He knew to like hit Cole and then take a full 25 seconds to look at the crowd, which wasn't there, and act for the camera, which was.
All right, so the match ends with Simmons escaping the power bomb, hitting a power slam, and getting the 1, 2, 3.
Beautiful power slam.
Really beautiful power slam.
Fantastic.
On Vader, who's such a huge guy, so that's particularly difficult.
Like, he looked like he was controlling Vader in the air.
It's not just one of the like snap power slams. It's like he lifts him up, twists him in the air, and
without a whole lot of momentum. Like, Vader didn't even run that much. So the setup for the match was that Sting was supposed to challenge Vader, but was injured by Jake the Snake Roberts. But I think that was all kayfabe. But this was like a huge surprise for people attending this house show. And I think it's interesting because about a month or two later, Bret Hart beats Ric Flair for the WWF title at a house show. And I wonder if there was some influence there where WWF was like, oh shit, people can't get the idea that WCW's house shows are more unpredictable and like cooler shit can happen there. Maybe we should do our big title change at a house show as well. Just speculation.
I mean, that would make sense. That seems like a kind of thing that would happen.
I wouldn't be surprised if they thought of it. I mean, there are several reasons why that title change happened in the WWF, not the least of which that Ric Flair was experiencing serious equilibrium problems. For a hot minute, he thought he was going to have to retire there, but it got better.
So
it was a quick thing they had to do.
Simmons held the title for about 4 months and then lost it back to Vader. There's like kind of a gap in his wrestling career before he comes to WWF, I think. I'm not sure really what he was doing for like 93 to 95.
I think he was just shuffled down the card, I would think, and then not used and just waiting out a contract would be my guess.
Like a lot of people in WCW at the time.
Yeah, exactly.
WCW was such a mess in the early 90s. Like they kept changing management. A lot of people were like, several people got fired that had like long-term contracts that they ended up just sitting at home and collecting what they call mailbox money every 2 weeks until their contracts were up instead of breaking the contracts, which, hey, good work if you can get it, you know?
I mean, they did that when WCW died.
Yeah, anybody that had a direct contract with Turner Time Warner, or I guess AOL Time Warner as it was by the time they folded, in not a contract with the company WCW, some of those people had contracts a year and a half out, and they got paid millions of dollars.
So Simmons gets signed by WWF during this very transitional time in the business. They give him the name Farouk Assad. They make him the modern day gladiator with this stupid ass looking helmet. He attacks Ahmed Johnson. I had you guys watch this promo.
I have a technical question about this gladiator character. So, like, is he supposed to be, like, actually from the past? Because he sort of makes a reference that I interpreted as he had traveled here from the past.
None of this was very clear. It was super vague. He was with Sonny.
Bad gimmick.
For some reason.
So can I just say about Sonny, you know what's aged like warm milk on a hot summer day is Sonny managing a feud between two black men.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, for sure. Sonny in general.
And you know they had that in mind by putting
I
it
was
there,
trying
right?
to be nice, but I guess she doesn't deserve it at this point.
No, she doesn't.
So that match between Farouk and Ahmed Johnson never happened at SummerSlam because Ahmed was injured, I think.
It was Ahmed Johnson. We can just assume he was injured.
Yeah.
You got a little taste of Ahmed here, Evan. He's great. Like, I loved Ahmed as a kid, but he wasn't able to realize his potential for various reasons.
Yeah, Ahmed Johnson was great, and as this is one of those things where it's like representation matters. Because I remember as a little kid, so this was 95 or 96. I would have been 7 or 8 years old, and just like I liked wrestling. I'd always liked wrestling, but then Ahmed Johnson shows up, and I'm like, whoa! And in my head, I didn't like put it together, but as an adult, I can look back and go, holy shit, black guy, and he's not Saba Simba, and he's not, losing all the time.
He
Holy
slammed
crap.
Yokozuna.
Yeah, he slammed Yokozuna. He became the first black Intercontinental Champion.
When he was doing stand-up interviews in the ring with Vince would look at him with a look on his face that it's a certain Vince look. He looked at Andre the Giant like that. He looked at Hulk Hogan like that. He looked at Steve Austin like that when he wasn't trying to make that face when he was being Mr. McMahon. But I think Vince wanted to just go with Ahmed Johnson, but Ahmed just kept getting injured.
Yeah.
Is there a specific person you can point to and say this was the first black wrestler to work for Vince McMahon and not be like a horrible caricature that Vince clearly pitched, and then the guy in his head was like, well, fuck, I would like to wrestle in the WWE, so I guess I'll take this awful gimmick he's given me.
You talking about Ahmed?
No, I'm just saying, is there
I
like
think he's
who
asking,
was the first guy to be able to embody a non-racist character in the WWE?
Coco Beware wasn't really a racist character.
Yeah, Coco
SD
Beware was but SD Jones worked for Vince Sr.
Rocky Johnson?
Kind of grandfathered in.
Rocky Johnson
Old
and Tony
man Rocky
Atlas?
Johnson.
I mean, that's a stereotype
I
at the
guess
very
so,
least.
Yeah. And
I defer to Devin on this one.
I mean, there were a lot of like character, like wrestlers where being black was part of their gimmick, but they weren't super offensive. Like you guys in the Roddy Piper episode talked about Bad News Allen,
Bad News
Brown, and I mean, he was black, and that was part of his character, but it wasn't like
he was a badass first.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It wasn't like he's black and
Yeah.
he's a criminal, or he's black and he's a jungle savage. He's a black man who's a badass, and he's a proud black man, and that's kind of it.
We'll get into it more when we get to the actual matches, but I felt like the way in which the WWE was presenting the Nation of Domination kind of like storyline or like their position as heels, I was watching it and I was like, while I couldn't say this is the most racist thing that WWE has ever done, it's sort of the deepest and most complex racism I've seen them do, where they're just like, oh yeah, a violent gang of people who want to dominate the world and people who are like fighting for like black power and rights in America. That's the same thing. Right. Those are the same guy. Yeah. Like, let's just take literally all of the fears that we have and embody them in this one group and then make them the worst villains. Yeah. And and then also they all seemed like good fucking wrestlers too. Like there was some good stuff happening in those matches, but yeah.
The funny thing about it is they put Crush and Savio Vega in there to be like, no, it's not actually a race thing.
I mean,
and later Owen
start up PG-13 white rappers.
PG-13.
Right, right at the beginning, before the Nation of Domination is a thing. It's literally just Farouk and a theme song.
Right. Wolfie D and JC Ice.
Yeah.
Oh, that
PG-13.
Yeah,
I mean, the thing about PG-13, when that gimmick started in Memphis as, hey, don't you want to hate these two guys because they're skinny white rappers? And then the WWE like completely legitimized the gimmick by putting them out there as part of the quasi black power group.
Yeah.
Like you're missing the mark a bit, Vince, as you tend to do.
The acquisition of this knowledge has caused me pain. And I just want to put that out there.
So I was at this Survivor Series when the Nation first debuted.
The Nation debuted,
at Madison Square Garden, right?
They were advertising the match, and in all the promotion, Farouk was still in his ridiculous gladiator getup. And like to their credit, they saw that for a couple of months, and they were like, "This isn't working." And it's not that Ron Simmons isn't working; it's that this isn't working, and they went in a different direction.
Take that stupid hat off.
And this is
for all the analysis we can do about the Nation. It ended up being a very successful group for a couple of years.
Yeah. I was going to say, the Nation of Domination, they were supposed to be bad guys, but for me as a kid, once again, I was just like, this is great. I love these guys. They're all amazing.
It was great.
Reincarnation of the Nation of Domination was great, in my opinion.
And I got to say, actually, that's good to know that there is because when I was I'm watching it as an adult, but when I was watching it, to me, I was like, oh, wow, they are so obviously framing them as like evil.
Oh, yeah.
That it like bothered me. So it's good to know that maybe that passed over the head of some kids and they were able to just enjoy the awesomeness of it.
I mean, I always liked bad guys. I've always been a fan of villains. Like my favorite comic book characters are always super villains.
You said your favorite wrestler was Roddy Piper, right?
Yeah, Roddy Piper is my favorite wrestler of all time, which is problematic, I understand, but also I didn't see any of that stuff. I was too young.
But like this is also an importantly like transitional time in the history of the WWF. This particular Survivor Series. Evan, you already watched the Bret Hart Steve Austin match from this.
That was the match immediately preceding this match. It's why the canvas is so covered in blood.
And this is also the night where Sid beats Shawn Michaels for the world title and the Garden cheers for him even though he's totally the heel. So the lines between face and heel were beginning to blur in a lot of different ways, which lent itself to attitudes toward the Nation being complicated and varied.
Yeah.
I mean, who amongst us besides Evan, who hasn't seen much of him or any of him at all that I can remember, hasn't cheered for Sid regardless of the situation?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, or his skill in the ring or anything else. He just comes on screen and you love him.
Yeah.
Correction here. I am mistaken. I don't think the immediate previous match was Bret versus Austin. The Bret versus Austin match I'm thinking of, where Austin bleeds out, is immediately preceding the street fight at WrestleMania.
Right. Yeah, he didn't bleed at the Survivor Series match.
Yeah.
So This Survivor Series match, part of it, like, we can talk about the nation, but I also think this is a very good opportunity for us to touch on a bunch of the characters that come out now who we may not do. Like, we're not going to do a whole episode on the fake Razor and Diesel, but man, Evan, please tell me what was going through your mind when they were like, here comes Razor Ramon, and then this cosplayer comes out.
I was really, it was a bummer because while I knew intellectually that that they own, the characters and the copyright on the characters a lot of the times, I hadn't really seen just a blatant recasting like this. And I didn't know if it was supposed to be like a joke or part of a storyline they were doing, or if they were really just like, no, these are those guys now.
I didn't know as a kid either. I couldn't tell whether they were being serious or not.
I still
honestly.
can't tell. And at one point, I think it's like, who is it? Is it JR on commentary that says
God.
he's? Is it JR on commentary that says
Yes.
like it's a more handsome Razor Ramon? And I'm just like looking at the TV like bullshit. This was 1996.
And he's taller too.
He has
Like,
as
let me
much
just-
right to be called Razor Ramon as anyone else.
Yeah.
Let me just know. It was just that he called him the more handsome Razor Ramon. Like, have you seen Scott Hall in 1996? he was one of the most attractive men of the era. Like, bullshit. Shut up, JR.
They couldn't have gotten someone with abs?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's be clear that like classic Scott Hall was like a sex machine sculpted out of pure beef. Like there's
Yes,
you can't just
exactly.
find
Yeah.
that.
Oozing machismo. This
Yeah,
guy
oozing
was
machismo.
not. This guy was oozing something. To paraphrase
I think
Bobby
he's just
Heenan.
oozing, yeah.
I think he's just oozing. Yes.
Cool. So there's 8 guys in this match.
Okay, all right. Let me
It's a lot
break
of
down
guys.
who's
Well, hold on. We're gonna give a pass to the fake Diesel.
Oh, did
Well,
you
that's
recognize
Kane,
him,
so-
Evan?
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry, spoilers.
That's okay.
No, I did not. Who is he? Well, I
He's
missed it.
Kane.
That's Kane. Yes,
Yeah.
that is Glenn Jacobs.
Oh.
That
And
is
he
mayor
was-
of Knox, Tennessee, anti-masker Glenn Jacobs.
Yeah.
He is also he was also Dr. Isaac Yankum, DDS, the dentist that we saw in a recent episode, I believe.
I want to be fair here and say that Kane was a better fake Diesel than the guy playing fake Razor.
Yeah, sure.
But,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, Diesel
Neither
didn't
of
have
them
a
were
whole
good,
lot
but
of
whatever.
stuff to do.
Right,
So it's
Diesel
easy
was
to
also
flirt.
way worse
Right.
than Razor.
Yeah. I mean, I love Diesel, but
You could argue that he was bad at it because he's just like Diesel, for all the ways that he sucks, is a very handsome man, and Kane is
very
not.
charismatic.
And you can't hide that. Kane can't
I mean,
fake that.
okay. I've listened to a lot of episodes of this show. I think you guys give Diesel way too much hate. He fucking rules. Kevin Nash
Yeah, here we go.
is a national treasure.
He has a very powerful charisma that I really do. I have to give that up, and he power slams people very effectively.
Power bombs, but yes.
Power bombs people.
I am enough younger than you guys that it's just like, you were smarter than me at the time when Diesel was happening.
No, Devin, I loved
No,
Diesel as a
Devin,
kid.
hold on.
I loved
It's-
Diesel
it's-
as a kid.
Evan here has seen a fair amount of Diesel now, and he's just not impressed.
I mean,
And we can't force it. It's okay.
is he
It's okay.
technically limited? Sure. But it's a hell of a character, and Kevin Nash is very charismatic. And I like Kevin Nash as a person more than as a wrestler, and I just apply
Same,
that
yeah,
to his
yeah.
wrestling.
He seems
before
like
you
a
get-
friendly person. I will say he does exude a real friendliness that is hard to fake.
Before, Ben, I know you're trying to get through the full rundown of the match. Before we get to that, there is a reason specifically why they did the fake Razor and Diesel. When Scott Hall and Kevin Nash showed up on Nitro using their real names, the WWF that day already started to try to sue WCW over their usage of the guys. Now, they couldn't tell them, well, you can't use these guys that you have under contract, but they say you can't use the characters that they were in the WWF. And they're like, well, we've given them different names. It's like, yeah, but Scott Hall is still doing his fake Cuban accent, which is not his real accent. He still has, like, his hair done that way. Kevin Nash is still, like, cool in the way that he is, which was very hard to define. And in order for the WWF to defend their trademarks and say, well, these are our characters that we can use them, they put on television 2 guys doing those characters to try and prove, this point that it's not these guys, it's the characters. Turns out it was those guys.
Yeah.
It was totally those guys, yes.
Yeah, the litigation, the constant litigation between the WWF and WCW is a long and boring story, and that's just kind of a tip of it. But there was a reason other than just arrogance why they did this. They were trying to prove a legal point.
So, is this the match Yoko was in?
Yeah, this was Yokozuna's last match.
We should touch on
in
that,
WWF.
as sad as it is.
Yeah. Okay. So rounding out Team Nation with Farouk, he's got the Nation with him, including Clarence Mason, who should be mentioned though.
Clarence Mason rules. I don't know why he went away.
Yeah.
He wasn't a wrestling guy. They hired him. WCW hired him briefly, and then that was just it.
So rounding out the team of Farouk, Fake Razor, Fake Diesel, and then Vader, who's there with Jim Cornette, and they're against Savio Vega. I had remembered him already being in the Nation at this point, but no, he's on the opposing team. Yokozuna, Flash Funk, who is the team captain, making his debut. Yes, for the former, and then later again, Too Cold Scorpio, who's a great wrestler and character and very notable person in his own
very
right.
innovative high flyer.
Yeah.
Can I give some random trivia? Can I give some random podcast trivia?
What's that?
About Too Cold Scorpio?
Please.
By all accounts of everyone that's ever met him, and this is no longer a rumor, everyone in wrestling who has ever shared a locker room with Too Cold Scorpio says he has the biggest dong that they've ever seen. This is not like rumor. This is not like on some like wrestling sleaze list. Several people have confirmed this.
In Mick Foley, he describes Scorpio as a genitalactic freak of nature, and he notes in his second book when he talks about writing his first book that lawyers went through his book to make sure he didn't say anything that could get him sued, and they singled that out. They're like, is Mr. Scorpio going to have a problem with you calling him a genitalactic freak of nature? And he said, if I know Scorpio, he has that page framed on the wall of his house.
Now, Scorpio...
I also just want to point out real quick, there was one point in the match where Flash Funk kicks somebody in the face, and one of the announcers goes, that's funky.
Too Cold Scorpio was so good, by the way.
Yeah,
Dong aside.
Scorpio was an incredible innovator in wrestling. One of the first great high flyers I became aware of when I started watching as a kid. Should have been more successful in the WWF than he was. Now, one, they stuck him with this gimmick that has possibly the most racist stereotypes clustered together in a single gimmick.
Dancing pimp.
Dancing pimp.
Dancing pimp, right.
Kind of, I think he was a rapper to some degree as well.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I think they were behind the Flash Funk character. According to Scorpio himself, the reason why he didn't go any farther was that he was heavily addicted to crack cocaine at this point.
Really?
So, yeah.
Yeah, he was on a lot of drugs. He had just come from ECW, where he was doing a lot of drugs, and before that he was in
where
WCW.
You went to do drugs and occasionally wrestle.
Right.
Yes. And I don't know what the drug scene in the early 90s in WCW was, but he was just on increasingly amounts of drugs, which is one of the main reasons why, as innovative as he was, he didn't quite hit the ceiling that he was capable of. Also, more high flyers started to come out, and since he wasn't really defending his crown, pretty soon, everybody banging on the high flyer drum kind of left Scorpio behind in favor of Rey Mysterio and the Luchadors in WCW. And if he had kept his stuff together, I think he would be in that conversation more often.
So the last member of this team, the mystery partner, is Mr. Murdery over there, Jimmy Superfly Snuka.
Alleged murderer, but only alleged because he did get put on trial.
Right, because he did.
Yeah, by the time they put him on trial finally, and
they were
then
like,
he
we
died.
can't because he's crazy or whatever. His brain is
But
mush.
he did absolutely kill that woman, though. Just on record for the podcast, we all agree he killed that woman.
Yeah, the judge looked at him and was like, he's going to be dead within the year and doesn't know he's in the courtroom. We can't try this. And it's true. Justice wasn't served when they didn't have the trial 30 years ago, not when the judge looked at him and said he didn't know he's here, and he was dead within the year.
Even if they had tried him and found him guilty, justice still wouldn't have been served in that.
Right.
I wanted to say one last thing about the fake Razor, actually. He does the fall-away slam terribly. Fucks it up completely.
Slam ever.
But Cornette says the SOS claims another victim. SOS, which stands for sack of shit, which is what Scott Hall called that move.
They even called like SOS. What does that stand for?
At one point, one of the announcers accuses the other of, he just goes, "You couldn't manage a Wendy's."
That was Jim Cornette talking to JR.
Okay.
Yeah, that's great.
So Fake Diesel eliminates Savio with the jackknife. Superfly eliminates Razor with the Superfly splash. And then they all get a bunch of chairs, and it's a big double DQ. And that's the end of that.
Yeah, Yokozuna was barely in the match. He came in occasionally to throw a few strikes here and there, but he was like, I couldn't tell you exactly how much he weighed at this point. Probably in excess of
600.
Yeah, in excess of 600 pounds. This was his last appearance, like on screen, I believe, for the WWF. Individual state athletic commissions started to not allow him to be on shows. And once one or two commissions say, no, you're not healthy enough to be on the show, all the others follow suit. And once that happens, the WWF finally had to cut his contract because he literally could not provide them the service that he was contracted to do. They tried so hard to get him to get his weight under control. You know, they sent him to programs, they gave him people to help, and he couldn't do it. He refused. He kept saying he was going to do it himself.
Your food addiction's real, man.
Food addiction is real.
He was addicted to eating. Straight up, all the stories you hear about him, he was addicted to eating, and he can barely. It's just depressing here to see him. It's not like weight shaming. He's clearly he can barely stay on his feet.
Right. If you're sitting around and you're like an average American at 250 pounds or whatever because of all the reasons your lifestyle is and everything that you eat and everything that you do, yeah, it's fine. That's fine.
You do
if
you,
you're
man.
600 pounds, chances are you have a big problem, and Yoko had a big problem.
If you're 600 pounds, there's a TV show you can go on now about how big of a problem that is.
Oh, my God. Well, Yoko sadly died before he was 40 because of these issues. He would continue to wrestle after this. Well, you can see him wrestle even heavier in certain places.
Legends of the Ring, right?
It's on the YouTube, I believe.
It's on the YouTube. Legends of Wrestling.
Legends of Wrestling. Legends of Wrestling.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, it's bad. It's real bad.
So, Evan, what did you think of this match for what it was?
I didn't understand why I was watching it.
You were watching it just to see the debut of the Nation mostly, and also to get this view of what the WWF roster was like during this transitional period. They're introducing these edgy gimmicks like the Nation and Stone Cold, but they've still got a lot of silliness going on as well.
Okay, that makes sense. Because I felt like there just wasn't a lot of Farouk in this match.
Yeah, they talk him up right at the beginning, and then he kind of clotheslines the dudes.
He delivers a fuck of a spine buster.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, his spine buster is a thing of beauty.
But yeah, I mean, I guess this was an all right. It seems like it's a weird time. Like now that you've contextualized it, it does seem like they didn't quite know what they were doing with anybody.
So fast forward to WrestleMania 13, which, as we've mentioned, you've seen the Bret Hart Steve Austin match from as well. And now we're already, this is, as we've talked about before, kind of the beginning of the Attitude Era. And this match, I think, besides the Bret Austin match, this is like my other favorite match from WrestleMania 13, the Chicago street fight between Ahmed Johnson and the Legion of Doom, Hawk and Animal. And they're all wearing the Legion of Doom shoulder pads, and Ahmed looks just incredibly badass.
Ahmed looks great, man. It's a shame there were problems. He could have brought the WWF into the next era.
Ahmed always looked badass.
Yeah.
And they're against the Nation of Farouk, Savio, and Crush with their whole crew, including D'Lo Brown now, who actually does a lot of the work in the match, despite not being officially in it.
Yeah, they don't even name him. They just keep calling him that guy over there.
He's like that guy. What's this guy doing? What's that guy doing? You haven't given him a name?
Soon afterwards, they'd start using his name.
Yeah.
So let's start with the promo before the match, the Nation promo, where they're They're like, yeah, the thugs and criminals are coming out. Like,
They sound like Magneto and the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. It's
Yeah.
like, no, we're for the good of everything. And evil.
Yeah.
It's like, wait, something isn't quite lining up here.
Yeah, exactly. It's okay. I will say, I love this match, and I remember watching the highlights of it because we weren't allowed to get pay-per-views. So watching it on Raw the next time and be like, "These are all my favorite people. How did I not get to watch this match?" Because LOD is my favorite tag team of all time. I loved Ahmed Johnson. Farouk was great. Like, I remember the Jax bone crunching action figures.
mm-hmm.
And
Oh, yeah.
as soon as Farouk and Ahmed Johnson were like in the line, I was like, need that. All right, I'm good. I don't need another Shawn Michaels. We're fine.
I've got those two also. Actually,
The general idea of the Nation of Domination fighting post-apocalyptic raiders, I mean, like, that is pretty badass, right? That's just, like, on a
Oh, for
basic
sure.
level,
Yeah.
the stylistic clash here is cool.
and it's
And
such a
Farouk looks badass with his beret.
oh,
yeah,
hell yeah.
big time.
Such a crazy
Right.
fun brawl. And
Yeah.
they really beat us over the head with that whole kitchen sink joke.
Yeah.
Despite the
and-
fact that
Yeah.
it doesn't actually get used in the match.
Yeah. They just brought it out so they can be like, yeah, see, the kitchen sink. It's the kitchen sink. It's like, okay, is this Chekhov's kitchen sink? When is the kitchen sink going to be?
Right.
I think my
Chekhov's
favorite...
kitchen sink. What was the Chekhov's joke we made before on the podcast?
Well, I
It was
talked
making
about
me laugh so hard.
A
Chekhov's-
trumpet.
Chekhov's
Oh,
trumpet,
yes.
yes.
or trombone, yeah.
Yo,
It was
yeah.
a trumpet.
I think my favorite part of this match, just my favorite like shot, is a couple of guys I can't remember who are fighting in the foreground on the floor. And behind them, one of the Nation guys is just getting up. And then you see Ahmed Johnson horizontally launch himself over the guardrail into the ring portion because he had just done that to the outside and the camera cut away, thinking that's the end of that. It's like, no, Ahmed Johnson this was WrestleMania. He's going to missile himself at his opponent again.
It's Ralph Wiggum flying through the window.
Right.
Isn't this the match where he hits, I think he hits someone with a chair and you could tell he didn't even really like stop to aim. He just like slams it on whoever he's aiming for, kind of.
They mention in the Undertaker match that we'll talk about next that Farouk had like a punctured lung and separated shoulder from this match, and I don't know how much of that is kayfabe, but the way he gets like slammed through the table by Ahmed and like pile drive, like I have a feeling that might have been a shoot. Actually, those injuries.
Yeah, he got fucked up. Like if anybody walked out of this match without some kind of injury, they should, I don't know, start a church or a god or some minor deity.
They should at least be donating their DNA to science so
Yeah,
as to
something like
build
that.
more resilient humans for the post-apocalyptic wasteland.
At some point, there's a pinfall, and it doesn't really matter. Everyone just
Yeah.
keeps fighting. The LOD managed to take out both of PG-13, which was great. Those guys really needed to get some Doomsday device in.
That was fucking beautiful.
Another thing that makes me think that Farouk was really injured is I have a feeling he might have been more of a part of the finish. Not necessarily that he was the one who was going to get pinned, but it seems like they kind of audible it a little bit. So, like, they do the Doomsday device on Crush, and they don't pin him. And then Ahmed just hits him with a 2x4, and then they pin him. And then they do the double Doomsday on PG-13 that Doc mentioned. But it seemed like, yeah, they weren't quite sure what they were doing, and it might have had to do with Farouk being hurt.
Yeah, I was watching this and I like the 2x4 thing happened. I was like, wait, that's the finish? After all this chaos, that's the finish. A 2x4. All right,
Yep.
whatever.
Yeah, the match was all chaos, and that includes kind of a finish that comes out of nowhere because, of course, they're all just beaten up enough to end it. And I like that. I like the fact that they let it get to be that much chaos. Like, who even were the defined members of the Nation of Domination? I mean, I guess it was Farouk, Savio, and Crush, but really it was the whole gang of guys.
Yeah, everybody
Yeah,
was there
it was all
taking
of them.
punches, throwing shots. Like
Clarence
Yeah.
Mason got debriefed, as the announcer
Right.
said when he got nailed the one time.
Yeah.
All right, so I think and we'll talk about this a bunch, but I agree that Farouk was mishandled, and like the whole nation gimmick was in a sense a mishandling, but he did get a shot at the main event. And we see that in this King of the Ring match, King of the Ring 97. The main event was for the world title, Undertaker defending against Farouk. And this is the one main event shot that Farouk got. And he didn't get another one afterwards. I think for a variety of reasons. But okay, before we get into the match though, this is a hell of a fucking promo as well before this one. Both of them.
I like the promos that have like 9 guys on screen at once, because I just think there's a certain effect to it, you know. My favorite one of those once was like 4 people, and one of them was Owen Hart, and they're going to go around and talk to everybody one at a time, and they talk to Owen first, then they move the microphone around so everyone else can have a say, but Owen just keeps talking. Not into the microphone. He just talks over everyone else, continuing to promo. I think when they finally cut the camera, he's still just going on about how great he is and how much his opponents suck.
Now,
I don't know why that came to mind.
Todd Pettengill mentions, unlike in the WCW match, Todd Pettengill mentions that if Farouk were to win, he would be the first African-American world champ, to which Farouk replies by saying he would be the first black world champ. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. And also that great line of, because the Undertaker is doing his pre-Kane bullshit, and so he's like, don't worry about that blackmail. Worry about this blackmail.
Oh, that was
you are a king.
That was incredible.
That was great. Well, Paul Bearer continues his streak of always being the best thing on screen whenever he's on screen.
Yeah, when I was thinking about putting this match on, like we already had 3 matches, and I was like, you know, it's not a great match. Like it's important in some ways, but once I noticed that like Paul Bearer was a big part of it, I was like, okay, we can make Evan watch 4 matches.
We are. I'm soon. I'm going to have to put my foot down, and we are going to have to put together the Paul Bearer episode.
Sure.
Because I every time I will. It's the only thing that when I'm scrolling through a pay-per-view to go see a match, I will stop and watch Paul Bearer segments that have nothing to do with the episode we're doing, just because every moment that I'm watching Paul Bearer is a moment that I'm a little happier.
I love when
life's a little better.
Doc is interviewing them and Undertaker tries to talk and Bearer's like, zip it, Lazarus.
Yeah.
Well, one thing that's great about Farouk's promo is that there is an undercurrent of just like, you're dead? I don't have time for that. Fuck you. That's dumb. I don't care.
This is gingery burnt to a crisp, Paul Bearer.
Yes.
Yeah, completely.
So then when they're doing their entrances, Vince has a couple of interesting lines. First, he says that Farouk would be the first world champion of color, which is false because Pedro Morales was champion. And then he says Farouk is definitely playing the race card here, which I guess is true in the story. But a weird thing for Vince to be saying.
Wasn't it like he kind of bullied his way into the match or something?
Yeah, he's claiming that, I think there was some kind of complaint that he hadn't gotten a shot previously or something like that.
Well, it's that kind of like halfway politically correct to cover for the fact that you aren't like what would now be known as woke in the slightest, shit that Vince has done a lot. Like if you're gonna do an angle where like a black man is trying to leverage that into an advantage and make him a heel, first of all, maybe don't. But second of all, if you're going to do it, like, go all the way with it. Do what they did in Smoky Mountain, where the gangsters were like, nah, for reparations, we're going to win with a 2 count. And then they did that for a while, where, like, New Jack would pin his opponent and be 1, 2, we win. Like, this didn't work. And, like, yeah, the whole, like, of color terminology that Vince was trying to use, that he used incorrectly, that all of that, when the only person who's like, no, I'll be the first black world champion is Farouk himself, because that's what it is. Well, I mean, it wasn't, he didn't win, but he beat Vader several years previous, so that's a different match.
I mean, it feels like Vince being like, all right, how do I play on people's like primal fears, and how like Farouk and the Nation are just sort of a repository of what racist white guys are afraid of when it comes, where like the way that he, like I was saying, he's like, oh, like criminals and black activists and dictators of African countries And these are all the same guys to me. And so it's the same, like, if there's sort of an affirmative action angle, I think that's like, or sort of like that's Vince being like, oh, here's another thing people are afraid of to play off of that. Because I think that's how Vince's psychology works.
Yeah. Plus, he's an old white dude from North Carolina. So.
Oh, yeah.
I was going to mention that as well, but
in
I'm
his
glad
brain,
Devin
it's like,
mentioned it.
no, black people are this, or this. Like,
Exactly. Oh, yeah.
I
think it's Vince looking at his own fears and being like, how do I make these characters out of my own fears that then resonate with racist white people?
And I remember, like, the Nation of Islam and stuff, especially under Farrakhan, was very much, like, looked at as demonic and evil by the mainstream American media at the time.
Yeah, oh, no, they were bad guys. They weren't good people.
I think
But the Nation of Domination stuff kind of informed one of the things you guys brought up on one of the New Day episodes was when the formation of the New Day was happening, and they were like, oh, okay, so if you're going to be a black stable, that means you're going to be like, or a black wrestler, that means you're going to be a jungle savage or a black militant or whatever. And they didn't want to do that. And this is an example of, well, black wrestlers, so yeah, black militant, black power guys, yeah, there you go. And they're bad guys. Of course, but even with the New Day, they started as a black stereotype. They were preachers.
Sure.
With a different black stereotype than we were used to.
Biggie still goes into that preacher promo mentality sometimes, but in fairness to Biggie, he is the son of a preacher, so
he's a child preacher.
Yeah.
Wow.
If you guys haven't listened to their podcast yet, there's an episode where he talks about how he was a child preacher, and that's why he's
fantastic.
not religious anymore.
Well, that's really
but
cool.
it still helps his promos that he can go into that so naturally.
Yeah,
it's natural now, as opposed to like Vince's idea of. I haven't heard the New Day podcast. I heard the New Day on Chris Jericho's podcast when they were on and explained all of that, and they were talking. Yeah, they were disappointed when they found that because they were like, we thought we knew all the stereotypes that Vince had heard of.
Yeah,
but
nope,
he's
he
constantly
picked up a
full of
magazine
surprises.
at some point.
Nope. But he says that when they were trying to get the New Day music together, Vince is like, yeah, church music. And then he gave them like slow 100-year-old organ music and like, hymns that have no rhythm. And they're like, well, we had to teach Vince who Kirk Franklin was because he had never heard of that. And he had never heard of Neo Soul. And he had never heard of basically any of the music that they've played in black churches for like 25 years now, at least.
Right.
Yeah.
And even when the New Day formed, or when they first came together before they were the New Day, when it was just Xavier Woods, Kofi Kingston, and Big E, people kept saying, oh, they're going to be a new Nation of Domination.
Right.
People have been saying that for 20 years now.
And I mean, a group like the Nation of Domination now could be pretty cool. But
interesting.
They'd be faces.
But the problem is, would they be though?
Yeah, that's the question.
Protesters are bad guys on WWE TV.
I was going to say the crowds wouldn't allow them to be heels, but there's no crowds.
Right.
Yeah.
There's no crowds.
I mean, I would be 100% behind them. Just being like, yeah, of course. I mean, you're being dicks about it, but your point is valid.
Would AEW be able to pull it off better, you think?
They need more black male wrestlers.
They have to hire more black men.
They have a very, very well diversified women's division, but their men's division not so much.
They've hired a lot of Latin and Latinas, but just
Scorpio Sky just isn't good enough.
Yeah, I was gonna say Scorpio
but they
Sky
haven't
and
hired
Private
a lot of
Party. Is that it?
Private Party, sure.
Are those the only black
and
people
Sunny
that work there?
Kiss.
Oh yeah.
Yes, Sunny Kiss as well.
Right. Yeah, they haven't done like a terrible job, but they haven't done a good job.
Okay, so this match, mostly uneventful, pretty slow. There's that one cool moment where Undertaker goes for what would later be called the old school, the tightrope walk, and then instead of jumping into the ring, he jumps out of the ring onto the Nation. That was fun.
Yeah, that was great.
Watching it, I was like, oh, did he do that on purpose, or did they pull him down? I don't understand what happened. Oh, he did it on purpose, because it literally looks like he just goes, oh no, and falls, because he doesn't like get a full twist and turn it into a crossbody.
He just jumps into them.
But he looked like an Undertaker jump, though. He looked like a bat,
Yeah, but the camera angle was really bad. When they showed the repeat or the replay, I was like, oh, okay, I get it. It was on purpose.
Yeah, this was less. I was not disappointed in this match, but I was expecting more Because I felt like I felt like the two of them, I was like, oh, this seems like another, like, like two people who are really good at the big guy style. Like, I'm like, I could watch them just sort of trade blows because it works with because their characters are so good. And it was kind of boring.
It was a match, and literally this match existed basically as we need a main event for this pay-per-view because the stuff we have planned for Undertaker isn't going to come to fruition for another month or two.
Right.
And the reason Farouk really didn't win is because they had plans for the WWF Championship at the time. Like, they knew that Brett was going to get it back and like all that.
Yeah, they were setting Undertaker up for the Kane reveal, right?
Yeah, Undertaker was getting ready to go into the Kane stuff. So, like, everybody had plans except for Farouk. But then I did happen to watch how Farouk's storyline progressed. Like, I got sucked back in, so I was just like, oh, that's right, 2 weeks after that was when they introduced the bigger, blacker nation. Yeah,
right,
yeah.
Right.
So I went back and watched all that stuff.
So, yeah, we'll probably talk about this more in the premium episode, but Evan should know they did make the nation all black after this, and then Savio Vega had his own Puerto Rican stable, Los Boricuas.
And Crush had a white supremacist biker gang.
Yes, the Disciples of Apocalypse.
Didn't it also include actual white supremacists?
Yes,
the
Harris twins. Yeah.
The Harris brothers are Nazis, by the way, guys. Just so everyone
we didn't know that at the time. We should have. They were skinheads.
Ball and Skull.
Yeah.
Oh, like not kayfabe, like real
Not
life.
No,
they have
dear.
SS tattoos.
You'll
see them.
Yeah, you can't.
At some point or another, they were. You'll see them at some point. They were lower card guys in a lot of places for a long time.
So Undertaker wins this match with a kind of scary tombstone.
Yeah. Oh man.
Oh yeah, that was probably one of the least well executed tombstones I've ever seen. It was a little frightening.
I was like, oh, are we watching this match because it's his last match and I'm watching a man die?
Oh yeah.
And then Paul Bearer wants him to do more damage. He ends up doing 3 more choke slams. My favorite Bearer moment is like this 1 second where the ref is trying to get him to stop, and he like raises his hand to like pimp slap the ref and gives him a look that was just amazing. It's like very comical expression. And then Ahmed Johnson comes out and gives Undertaker the Pearl River plunge, which that was the first time I had ever seen a Tiger Driver was Ahmed Johnson doing it. And it was always fucking impressive and awesome.
Great finish.
I feel the need to continue to bang this drum that Vince wanted to go with Ahmed Johnson.
He did.
Who, but a person who he wanted to be the top guy, would he have come out after the main event, try and talk some sense into The Undertaker, and then when that fails, beat the crap out of The Undertaker,
who's the
uncontested, who's the world champion at the time, and then leave. It's so disappointing.
Ahmed Johnson was great, and Vince wanted to go with him, of course. You can tell just by looking at it. But I think I mentioned this in personal life conversation, that what ended up happening to Ahmed Johnson was a combination of injuries and The Rock.
Yeah, a little thing called Dwayne Johnson happened.
Yeah.
We also, Doc, correct me if I'm wrong, I remember we watched a shoot interview with Ahmed Johnson years ago, and he said that he left for some, like, family issues.
Yeah, he said he had to go and take care of, I think, his sister or something. But he said he never told the WWE. That's his story, and he's sticking to it. He's like, I didn't want to burden them with my problems. And it's like, but you got to tell your job why you're leaving.
Yeah, man.
It's like, that's especially when it's, 2 or 3 years down the line, stuff might be okay. And he did eventually go to WCW at the heavy request of Booker T and Stevie Ray, despite the fact that by then he was out of shape and really was not an asset anymore. And it's a real shame.
But to Devin's point, The Rock did take over the nation.
Yeah,
and that
The Rock
changed things.
took Ahmed's spot basically, and then became the biggest star that wrestling has ever produced.
The little thing called Die Rocky Die happened.
And also The Rock's first black WWE champion, WWF
there you go.
champion. No man other than The Rock held that belt until last year.
Right.
How about that?
Had it, which is fucking crazy.
Yeah.
We watched that match, right? Yes. That's the match
Yes.
we watched?
We did.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
did.
It was
It was a
fucking
great
amazing.
match.
Yeah. I can't believe The Rock murdered Ahmed Johnson, and we're breaking that news on this podcast right now.
If it weren't for The Rock being a cold-blooded killer.
Everyone on this podcast has murdered someone at this point, except me.
I've never... What? What did you hear? What do you know?
No, I meant the regulars.
Well, in that case, I don't know what you're talking about.
Also, I mean, by all of us, I mean Evan. We know what you did to Dungeon Master.
If you listeners, if you, this has been Contesting Wrestling, and if you'd like to learn about the people that I've murdered. No, do we have any final thoughts before I wrap this up and pitch the Patreon tier, the new our Patreon tier where I murder guys?
Dungeon Master's grave, you son of a bitch.
I'll say I know we're running a bit long. I'll give a few final thoughts. Farouk was an incredible athlete before he was in wrestling, and when he was in wrestling, every time you hear an interview with him, he's grateful for all the opportunities he got. And if you ask him if he should have won the title a bunch more times, all he kind of does is count his money at you. And which he made a lot of in the Attitude Era and beyond as a big act.
And now he's got the best job in wrestling.
Yep.
Oh yeah, he shows up, says one word, and everybody loves him.
My final thought is, damn.
Someone had to say it, and I'm glad it was you,
Devin.
Devin.
To say it.
Yeah.
Now learn to count.
I know how to count at least up to 3.
Fair enough.
I think I've seen countouts in XSW.
I've counted up
anyway.
to almost 10. I don't think I've ever actually ended a match based on a count out.
You would. Do you have anything to plug?
Me, personally?
Yeah.
No. Wear a damn mask so I can, live again. That'd be great. And the old standbys, stay out of the ocean. Paw Patrol are narcs. That kind of stuff.
R.I.P. Hobart.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
what's your
Hey, let's not go there.
what do you want people to follow you on Twitter?
Oh, yeah, I suppose you could. I suppose. Twitter and Instagram is the same. It's Devin T. Simmons, DEVINTSIMMONS on it. So,
yeah, no relation to Ron.
Yeah, of course, yes, no relation to this Ron Simmons, as I mentioned, my older brother, also a Ron Simmons.
And once again, I really have to double down on. I'll say this as the person least involved with XSW out of anybody here. I have nothing to gain.
I have no involvement
from
with
their
XSW
success.
ever. What are you talking about?
You go, yeah.
Sure. Ben doesn't know what XSW is.
Yeah.
He learned today.
You sound a lot like the Ultimate Warrior, but
hey, I have as much relation as you do to any Ron Simmons. Right?
Yeah.
Evan, what were you saying?
But it's great. It's great, and you should check it out. And especially if you're somebody who still is not a big fan of normal wrestling, it's awesome. It is a great, especially if you are a comedy fan. And there's a dearth of great sketch comedy out there a lot of the times, and there's some stuff, and it's a cool blend of things. I've enjoyed all the XSW content I have seen.
You can find several XSW shows on IWTV, IWTV.live, and there's an XSW YouTube channel that has a couple of more XSW shows on it, so look for that.
This has been Contesting Wrestling. Follow us on Twitter @ContestingW. Let us know how you feel about things or whatever isn't a thing. Things that aren't covered by the word things. So any of those, that should cover everything, those two concepts.
And send all complaints to @ScribeBen.
Yeah. Or send, even if they're not complaints you really have, just make stuff up and you can just send it to them, and that's fine. That if you enjoy this, that's great. That's what we're trying to do here, and you should enjoy it more and harder at patreon.com/contestingwrestling for $5 a month. And you get bonus episodes. And one day we'll have more stuff than just bonus episodes. But we're working towards that. But for now, you get a bonus episode every week. And that's pretty good. I think. I'm biased, obviously. But it doesn't matter. This has been Contesting Wrestling. Thank you. We love you.
Bye.
And see.